so that you're kind of teed up then. So, all right, we'll get it going. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey there, spiritual dope. We are here today with my guest, Thomas Capshew. He, Tom, what I do with your bio, Tom? There we go. He is an expert in the field of human potential. Dr. Capshew utilizes psychotherapy, meditation, energy work, Reiki, hypnosis, shamanic practices, and spiritual mentoring to help his clients find positive change in their lives. With the heart of a social worker, the mind of an attorney, and the soul of a mystic, Dr. Capshew spreads consciousness through his writing. He published both Divine Warrior Training, Manifesting the Divine in Our World, and Consciousness Rising to spread love through the world and to advocate for a peaceful, loving planet. Currently, he resides in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and enjoys the outdoors, photography, and music. So a good doctor. Thanks for joining us today. I like to start these off with the whole idea that Source speaks through us, right? We're kind of like these conduits for divine energy creation. And right now, in this very moment, something's coming through you that needs to be shared with somebody who's listening to the podcast. What is that message?
The message is that this is the year where we are going to have more healing happening in the world on this planet than we have trauma happening. We're going to reach a tipping point where the collective trauma and wounds that we've all experienced will be outweighed by the amount of people working to heal those wounds. And from there on out, we're going to see a huge shift in the amount of light and life and love that flows into the world.
Where do you feel like you see that?
It's happening all over the place. If you just listen to the media, you're not going to see it. All you're going to see is negativity, because that's what attracts people. It's like watching an accident. You can't take your eyes off of it. But if you look at what's happening in our communities, what's happening with each other, it's creating all kinds of win-win situations, from people developing organizations that transform homelessness to poverty, to all of the major questions and issues that we've had as collective humans. Those are all coming into new positive solutions. There's a website that I follow called Heart Math that does a global coherence project, where they've got these measuring sites around the world that show when the human collective gets into coherence with each other, and it's happening more and more frequently. So there's lots of evidence. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Virginia, and have a private practice here as well as a practice online. And in the last couple of months, I've never had the volume of people coming in saying, I'm 55 years old and I've been carrying this around since I was 8 years old. I want to get rid of this trauma that happened to me, this event that happened to me at 8 years old. I'm no longer interested in having it limit me. I've had such a volume of people coming in the last few months that are shedding their wounds of the past.
That's great. Do you think that they have, what do you think the reason, is there something pointing to that? Like what the reason is for them now? Why now release that trauma, right?
Well, I think collectively in my book, Consciousness Rising, I assert that we are all part of the consciousness that created the universe. And from a vibrational standpoint, as time moves forward, consciousness, the vibration of consciousness rises. And so it's easier for people to see their limitations and to recognize that they can shed those limitations. So collectively, as a species, our entire collective is raising its consciousness. So it's getting lighter and lighter and easier to shed those darker energies that we took on when we got wounded.
Gotcha. So, it sounds to me like, just consciousness as a whole is evolving, right? And that's what we're experiencing when we see people who are coming in, releasing the trauma and letting go of the things that are limiting them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, look, I really enjoy the book. Actually, Consciousness Rising. I'd share it with you, but I'm using a reader on the MacBook here, and I've just got highlights, just highlighted many different things. Let's talk a little bit before we jump into the book, though. Let's talk a little bit about, who is Thomas Capshew, right? Like, I know you've got, what I know about you is where the pieces of, it says, kind of with the heart of a social worker and the mind of an attorney and the soul of a mystic. I know a few of where those pieces come from myself, but let's let the audience know, like, where does the mind of an attorney come from in that?
Yeah. Well, I've had what I call a meandering path through my life. So I started off as the middle of 5 children raised in a fundamentalist Christian household, and started off my college career studying to be a minister, and ended up having a crisis of faith and left the church. Ended up getting a psychology degree undergrad, and then owned a small business and decided I didn't want to do that any longer. And so kind of on a whim, I went to law school. The reason that I went to law school is because I was a janitor in a law firm and had a running dialogue with the secretaries about how often I was supposed to clean the kitchen. They were messing it up every day, and I was supposed to clean it once a week. And the attorneys told me they were laughing about the messages we were leaving back and forth, and they said, "You should think about going to law school because you make good arguments and you write well." So, a few years later, I went to law school. I practiced law in Florida for 7 years. I enjoyed it. I was good at it, but it didn't make my heart sing. And so eventually I got involved in the legal aspects of assisted suicide. That was back when Jack Kevorkian was doing his thing. And I was doing legal seminars for hospice workers about, how to navigate that, and I got to know some social workers and thought, hey, that's a good combo, social work and law. So I went back to school and got a master's and PhD in social work, and then graduated and practiced social work. And in the meantime, I decided to go to an interfaith seminary in New York City and got ordained as an interfaith minister, which kind of completed the circle of my meandering careers. But it's really fun because I feel like I've put them all together in what I do now, which is, I've got the ability to see clearly what's happening, which an attorney does. I've got the the compassion that a social worker would have, and I have the spiritual focus of my interfaith ministry.
Well, I always think of life as the family circus, right? And that path that Billy goes on when he's kind of walking around the neighborhood, right? It's just kind of like, it's just and life is not linear, right? I don't care. I don't care who you are. I'm sure you went to school and you had some goals and you met them, right, by becoming a lawyer, and that seemed like it was linear. But I'm sure that the whole path there and throughout was not, right.
Right.
I'm really curious. So I'm not aware of what a fundamentalist Christian is. Could you just elaborate on that for me? Because there might be an audience member or two that might not know what that is.
Okay. The way I'm using that term is someone who believes that the written New Testament is to be taken literally, and that that's what you use to decide how to live your life on a daily basis. And so it's non-denominational, meaning it's not, one of the big, it's not Catholic, it's not Methodist, it's just each church stands on its own. So it's fairly constrictive around behaviors, no drinking, no smoking, no dancing, no music in the worship service other than a cappella singing. So that's what I was raised in.
Sounds very, if we're going to go to the 80s, very Kevin Bacon, very Footloose, right?
Yeah.
Referenced, I'm happy to share my age, as we mark ourselves as we go through these. The other piece in here is, so so even though it was kind of restrictive, you still went to go study to be a minister right off the bat, right? And I'm just curious. You mentioned the crisis of faith. What do you feel like that was?
Well, one of the things I did as a member of the church is I did missionary service. So I went to Europe to try to convert people to Jesus. And the crisis of faith that I had was I had this question that the members of the church couldn't give me an adequate answer for. And that question was, say, there's a guy that lives in the jungles of Brazil and has never even heard of Jesus, much less, been offered to accept Jesus as a savior. But he lives a good life and he takes care of people and he does the things that Jesus would ask him to do, and he dies. Does he go to heaven or does he go to hell? And the answer that I got from everyone in the church was, he goes to hell, and it's your job to get there before he dies so that he won't go to hell. And that just wouldn't compute for me as I have come to know my creator, the creative force of the universe. The shorthand that I use for that force is love. That love is what created the universe and what is that energy that sustains us. And so obviously, if the creator is all loving, then there, may not even be a hell, much less have some arbitrary decision that some guy that's not heard of a certain person is going to go to hell.
Yeah, like what about everybody that came before Jesus?
Right.
No, so that makes sense, right? I mean, I can see kind of where that breaks down. And then, so you're going through law school, you become a lawyer. We'll hit on Heartsong here in a little bit. And where kind of in here do you go full on spiritual, right? Where's like kind of I know in your book and I jotted it down too, or at least I highlighted it in the book. It's like, life's kind of like a series of awakenings, right? And it's not just hey, there's one awakening moment, but there's a series of them. But if you could kind of pinpoint where you feel like you had maybe your first.
Well, the first awakening was the crisis of faith. The awakening that brought me to the work that I do now is that as a social worker, the spiritual component often is not considered. And when you think about mental health, oftentimes what I've found in my practice is that mental health issues arise out of a spiritual discontent, out of kind of not really knowing what you're doing here, not having a framework for how the world works for you. And so then out of those uncertainties often come anxiety or depression. If you're working in a job where you're doing something that doesn't really make your heart sing, then it's real easy to go into depression. What am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Am I just doing this to get a paycheck so that I can pay my mortgage, so that I can, not be homeless? I mean, what kind of life is that? So that's where the spiritual discontent comes in. And if you focus on getting to the essence of why you're here, why you're on the planet at this moment or at this lifetime, then you can start moving into a place where you're enjoying waking up and getting up and doing what you feel is what you're supposed to be doing for your life, instead of doing what somebody else wants you to do for your life.
Right. No, understood. Right. Definitely something that we hit on this podcast often. Right. When you find you've kind of woken up to the idea that what you're doing now is really everybody else's best idea for what you should be doing, right? And then trying to figure out how to unwind all that into what you at least feel like you should be doing. So no, I love it. So let's talk about the book. Consciousness Rising. Why here, why now, this book?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about how this book came to be, because after my first book, Divine Warrior Training, I didn't really have any plans to write a second book. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I kept waking up at 4:18 a.m. and got up and had stuff to write down. I typed out stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's an interesting article. Like one of the first ones was nothing exists outside of relationship, that you can't even define something without defining what it's not or what it's in opposition to. And so over the course of the next couple of years, I just kept on getting prompted to wake up at 4:18 and write stuff down. It wasn't every time at 4:18, but more often than not. And then eventually it dawned on me again, kind of those awakenings to what Source has in store for you. I said, oh, this is a book. And originally it was a book called The Human Value Proposition, which is the first part of Consciousness Rising. But it eventually developed into what we have now. And the why is mainly because I think it is inevitable. It's absolutely essential to reality that consciousness ends up remembering itself in the material form. That's the whole process that we're a minute part of. We're actually the leading edge of the material form, recognizing everything as divine, and we're just on the cusp of getting to that place where we say, there's everything's sacred. There's nothing that's not sacred, and we need to start treating everything that way. And when we do, our whole world is going to shift.
No, absolutely right. I love the idea of kind of being on the edge of consciousness, right? Being kind of, I always think of it as, just being literally on the razor's edge, right? Is that fine? As the universe continues to expand, we are, the expanded, the expansion of consciousness, right? And right on that edge, right? Always right on that edge of creation, right? This is what's happening right here and now. Would you tell me what you mean by consciousness?
What I mean by consciousness is intelligence that created the material world. So in my first book, Divine Warrior Training, I call this process the God game. God's, one of those shorthand labels for consciousness as well, although it's kind of been co-opted by some people to be something less than what it is. But the God game is before anything in the material world existed, there existed this intelligence. And this intelligence decided at a point of singularity to begin a process where matter was created, and matter is more dense than intelligence. And the game is that from that point of singularity, it created the material world so that the material world would eventually be able to recognize the intelligence of the universe. So it goes a full circle back. It's like a hide and seek game. We're part of this huge hide and seek game where the intelligence of the universe forgot itself, and now it's coming back to remember itself.
Love it. So the God game, the end game, is essentially just to recognize the intelligence of the universe, right?
Right.
And would you say that is that part and parcel to reconnecting to it as well? Is that the recognition period? Is that the recognition period when you actually reconnect?
Yeah. When we've all humans have experienced we've all had an experience where we've felt one with everything. Most of us have. Some people say they haven't felt that, but many humans have felt that. That's reconnecting. That's joining back into the understanding that everything's connected. You and I are connected. Every person that listens to this, every person that doesn't listen to this is also connected. So that's the inevitable movement forward of consciousness, to get to that place where I recognize that you're a part of me, that I'm a part of you, I'm a part of the plant that's sitting in front of me. We're all connected.
So I try to share out the idea that the universe was created from something the size of a pea, right? And if we think that we're not connected, like after all being kind of jammed and crammed into the size of a pea, right? Knowing what we know too about just kind of like how photons and everything just stays connected, right? There's no mass is not mass is there's never any less mass, right? The same amount of mass exists in perpetuity. So at one point, we've all been a part of one another, right? So we carry it even from a material level, right? Even if we can't wrap our heads around like being synced on an energetic level, we can wrap our head around the idea that we all share some type of at least a couple skin cells from whatever before us, right?
Well, if you think about atoms and molecules, atoms, don't disappear; they just get reconstituted. So, we each can have atoms that used to be part of Albert Einstein or part of Hitler or part of Jesus. Those atoms, the material world just is in constant flux of shedding stuff and reconstituting as something else. And so we've each got that we share.
Yeah. No, and I just think it's sometimes it's challenging to share that idea if somebody's not in this space, quote unquote, right? So if they're like, what are you talking about? How do you share that idea? So thanks for walking through that visual as well.
Well, actually, COVID has helped us with that a little bit because we now understand in ways that we didn't before COVID that respiratory droplets are what sends COVID from me to you. And they're not anything that we can see, but we've certainly been able to verify that with science.
Right.
And so then my being in proximity to your being has an impact, even if I can't see it.
Right.
And so you take that from the biology of COVID and you put it into the energetics of physics. And, anytime you're in close proximity with anybody, your atoms and photons are all mixed up together. And, we know that intuitively.
Right.
You walk into a room and everybody's angry. You can feel it.
Right.
You walk into a room and everybody's having a blast. You can feel that, right? You can't necessarily measure it because it's energetic versus,
we can't measure it because we haven't developed the tools to do it yet, right? Like, I mean, it's really kind of what it boils down to, right? Yeah. I'm sure that there's, I'm sure there's somebody who's working on it right now, right? I'm sure there's a prototype, no doubt. Yeah. One more thing too is going from a lawyer to a social worker, right? Why do that?
Yeah, why do that? Exactly. Well, because I wanted to follow my heart. I enjoyed practicing law. I was good at it. My last job was as an appellate attorney for the Department of Transportation in Florida. And if you want to look it up, my last case was before the Florida Supreme Court, and I won that case 7-0. And it was estimated that I saved the state of Florida $660 million. So, it wasn't that I couldn't do the work, it's that it didn't make my heart sing. When I chose to go back to school, and I love to study, I'm a lifetime student. When I chose to go back to school, my attorney friends, half of them thought I was nuts to go from law to social work. The other half were envious. because they weren't necessarily doing what they wanted to do, but they felt like they were kind of stuck. So, sometimes you just have to make a bold move and be courageous and say, this is my life and I've got to live it the way that I think I need to live it, even if you make a mistake. And it wasn't a mistake.
No, and of course, my first thought is like, well, not for you, Tom, right? So it worked out for you, and to your point though too, I think that even if it's a mistake, I did a recent interview where, we're just trying to talking at the end of the interview, and she was just talking about whatever it was that she's doing, developing into like, making a living. I'm like, look, the worst case scenario is like you're doing something that makes sense to you, right? To your point, following the Heartsong. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that is one of the topics in the book is the Heartsong. So, which I thought spoke out nicely. I think it came in, right underneath of, and I like that topography of potential, right? So let's talk about a little bit of what is the topography of potential and the Heartsong.
Okay. First, I want to comment about a mistake, because a mistake is only a choice that you've made that you haven't learned from yet. Once you learn from it, it's no longer a mistake. It was maybe a misdirection, but it adds to your to your path.
Riddle me this one. I've seen this a lot of times in like in the hardcore personal development series, right? I just say hardcore professional development series for these people that like, grind and hustle people, right? But the idea that a mistake made more than once is done on purpose. True or false?
No. A mistake made more than once is you haven't learned yet. From the shamanic standpoint, we create circumstances over and over again to heal ourselves, and sometimes that circumstance will re-wound us. But that's part of our energetic move forward, is to try to create the condition that will create the healing.
All right.
So
okay. Yeah. No. Thank you for that. I like I said, that's one that always kind of irritated me. Right. It's just like, who are you to make that claim, right? To be like, well, you made that mistake more than once. That's done on purpose. What are you talking about, right? Like, how can you be so like that's, anyways.
Right.
So topography potential, Heartsong. Let's hit it.
Yeah, topography of potential. Each one of us is created by love and comes into the world with a topography of potential, just like a topography map. There are things that we will easily be good at and things that we will have to work like hell to be good at. So there's valleys in our topography of potential, as well as hills or mountains. So a good example is comparing my basketball skills to LeBron James' basketball skills. I was born with a valley in my topography of potential for basketball. LeBron James was born with a mountain. So absolutely, he's worked his butt off to get where he is, but he started with the ability, with a lot of potential that he just built on to make him such a phenomenal basketball player. I would never have gotten there because I didn't have that preset group of skills. I had other skills that, I've worked to develop. So each one of us has that topography of potential, and our work is to develop a deep enough relationship with ourselves so that we can know what that topography is, so that we can find what I call our heart song, which is our heart song is that one purpose that we are on the planet to fulfill. So, um, for me, it's working with people to live into their potential. And it's taken me a while to come to that understanding that that's what I was put here to do. And so, uh, developing different skills that help me to live that heart song, over time, what we've done with people, we've as a species, we have wasted so much human potential. In fact, all of us, every single one of us, will die without actualizing all of our potential.
Well, I mean, and just to pause there for a second. I mean, is that necessarily a bad thing? Is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? And like, let's say that you're doing all you can to maximize who you are, um, or is it more to the sense of there is always something more and greater that you can accomplish, right? And regardless, right? So inevitably, yeah, we're all going to perish, leaving something on the table, right? Is that kind of the thought there?
Yeah. And, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is that the way we've built society is we really don't work at helping people develop their potential. We work at it, our schools work at developing people to work for other people instead of to follow their own dream. And so, who's the next Yo-Yo Ma in a low income area of Chicago that won't even know that for their whole life because no one introduced them to a cello,
Right.
right?
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, that was something you hit on in the book as well. It was talking about, I guess, coming along your path or opening up to your heart song, or it may have been another section. And of course, it spoke to me just because we talked a little bit about seeing things may look bad right now, but they're actually good, right? And one of the things for me that's turned out well, and this relates into the story of your book, we've had to pull our kids from the educational system, right? And we've been able to teach them at home, and I'm very excited about it because I recognize that we're not like crushing little souls, right? Or trying to morph them into these solid and industrial line workers, right? So for me, it's very exciting, right, to be able to kind of break a shackle, as it were, and to be able to we talk about coming back to ourselves, right, by coming back to ourselves. But a big part, and this is just my opinion, right, a big part of us coming back to ourselves is because we've been layered and layered in things that we aren't by the social conditioning, right? So if you don't get socially conditioned, right, then who do you have to come back to? Then you have the opportunity to live out your whole life as who you're supposed to be.
Right, right. So imagine a world where every newborn was seen as God, as seen as a divine being with unlimited potential. And our job as caretakers for that newborn is to help them develop their innate potential. What kind of world would we have within 5 years? I mean, just think of the transformation where people would all be doing what they love and what they were meant to be. And, everything, my belief is that when we live into that world, everybody's going to be doing their heart song and everything's going to be taken care of. I mean,
Providence.
I could be a janitor and be singing my heart song, or I could, decide that I'm going to figure out a way to convert human excrement into energy for, whatever.
Right.
The possibilities are endless if we start with the idea that as parents and as caregivers, we're shepherding in a higher consciousness when a baby gets born.
I think it's interesting to think of it that way, right? To just realize that that's the consciousness expansion kind of coming right in behind you, and it's your job or your goal, or if you put effort into it, then you can help accelerate that expansion. Is that how you would kind of look at it? So you also bring up the idea, and I thought this was pretty cool too, and it really kind of relates to the whole thing, but the tsunami of acceleration, right? Or the tsunami of consciousness and kind of what we're doing here in consciousness rising. Why don't we share a little bit of that? And I'd love to hear, have you share where you see that coming into play.
Well, the tsunami is just the volume of consciousness that's coming into the world. So if you think about it, 50 years ago, we didn't have a word for domestic violence. We didn't have a word for child abuse. Those were concepts that have come into existence in the last few years. We are accelerating the recognition of trauma and of wounds that then we begin to heal by raising our consciousness and recognizing the way that we can treat each other that is a win-win for everybody. And so that tsunami is happening. The downside is we're also in a tsunami of information. Humans have never had access to as much information as they've had in the last, every year it grows exponentially. And so the problem with the access to information is that it requires our brain to process the information. Our brain is also designed to look for danger. And so that's where fear comes from. And so there's so much information that anybody can access a limited amount of information and go to fear. And that's what's happening in our society is we're getting siloed into different information flows that create fear of each other. Instead of going to our heart where we access our creator and the love of the universe, and our heart is the place that when we live out of our heart, then we see the expansiveness and the way that we can all win and all get along and live into our potential and live our Heartsong. So, there's a couple of tsunamis going on. One of them is pushing us toward fear, and one of them is pushing us toward love. And the great thing about being human, probably the one thing I'd say is the most the best thing about being human is we have choice. We get to choose love, choose fear. Fear is of the head, love is of the heart.
I think that the power of choice is it's recognized and it's often unrecognized, right? So it's like once you recognize the power of choice, you're astounded, right? But until you realize just how powerful choice is. The word and meaning seems arbitrary, right? Because again, I'll go back to the, you feel like you made all your choices yourself, but really you just accepted everybody else's choices for you, right? And then at a certain point you realize, yes, you accepted all their choices, but now you can start to see and turn your knobs and whatnot for yourself, right? To make your own conscious choices, right? With intention, purpose, for those outcomes. One other term that you have in the book that I really enjoy is the dominator consciousness, and to me that's kind of what we're coming out of if we choose to look at it that way. But could you share what that means?
Dominator consciousness is what we've been embedded in for thousands of years, and it is the sense that it's important to have power over other people versus power among. And so what's happened is we've bought into the idea that there's a limit to power and resources and love, and all of those things are limited when in fact they are not. They're unlimited. If we access power from our Creator, there's plenty of power for everybody. If we access resources from our Creator, there's plenty for everybody. If we access love from our Creator, there's plenty for everybody. So the dominator consciousness perpetuates itself by creating scarcity and then selling that resource to people. So, for example, land is scarcity. There's a certain amount of land available, and if you live in Northern Virginia like I do, you're going to pay a premium for a piece of land. If you live in the northern territories of Canada, that same size land would probably be, a minuscule amount compared to what it is in Northern Virginia. So it's creating scarcity and then saying, okay, well, I'm going to have power over you by marshaling this resource and then not sharing it with people. So power among is understanding that we all have capacity to access our source of power and love and resources. And when you do that, you become a manifester yourself, and you bring into the world the things that are needed, and with your co-creating with the Creator.
Yeah, no, that's the part where you really, where you release that scarcity, where you release that restriction on yourself, right? And you open yourself up to the possibilities, right? And therefore, this kind of goes back to you. Now you're making those conscious choices. Now you're in alignment with who you are. Now you start singing your heart song, right? And you begin to kind of let it all in. What is like one practical tool that you would give to somebody who's on the journey today?
The most useful practical tool that I'd suggest is to develop a practice where you go to your heart, where you meditate and you access what I call the temple of your heart, or the sacred heart. And from that place, you can access the resources of the universe. And so developing a relationship with your interior landscape, as I call it, is probably the best thing you can do to find your path forward. Because our mind is what keeps us engaged with the exterior world that we see. And we aren't going to find our passion and purpose out there. We'll get a lot of people that'll tell us what they think it should be, but only when you access your heart can you hear that quiet whisper of your heart's song. And that's the only place in the world that no one else can go to but you.
Right. Yeah. Do you have, I think I've seen some meditations that you offer. Do you have a meditation that would somebody could experience like this?
I do. There's on my website, which is thomascapshew.com, there's a free Choose Love meditation that you can download. And in the last couple of months, I got a bunch of meditations put up on in my shop. They're really expensive, though. They're 97 cents a piece. So
breaking the bank.
Yeah, right. So what I do a particular kind of meditation called ecstasis meditation. And the purpose of an ecstasis meditation is to shut down your mind and shut down your body so that your consciousness can expand and move out into what I call the sea of possibilities. And so an ecstasis meditation takes you, it's a guided meditation that takes you on a journey to a place where you become one with everything. And then I've got a series where then I lead you back on the level 0. The level 1, you go to the sea of possibilities and spend 3 minutes, and then I lead you back. Level 2, you go for 9 minutes, and then I bring you back. And level 3, you go for 27 minutes, and then I bring you back. And so the purpose is to develop the skill to be aware in your consciousness without having your mind intervene. So it's theta brainwaves for those of you that are more into the science. We're right now in beta brainwaves. If you closed your eyes and breathed down into your diaphragm, you'd go into alpha brainwaves, which is light relaxation. Theta brainwaves is 4 to 8 hertz, and that's deep relaxation. And that's where, you come up with a lot of creative ideas and stuff like that. And then delta brainwaves is sleep. So ecstasis meditations are designed to have you hit that theta brainwave range and move out into your consciousness and leave your mind and body behind for a given period of time.
It's always nice to leave the body, Tom. Always nice to leave the body. So just real quick, who would you say your ideal client is, if you've got an idea of that?
My ideal client is someone who is self-reflective and who knows that they're a spiritual being having a human experience, but often gets trapped in the human experience. And so, my job is to kind of help them tip that scale over to where they can live their life knowing that they're a spiritual being and everything they experience is a human experience.
Awesome. So if your ideal client is listening right now, they should go to find more of you at thomascapshew.com, or where should they find you?
Yeah, that thomascapshew.com. I have, they can click on a free 30-minute consultation so we can chat about what their needs are and what skills I have and whether that's a good match or not. I'd also like to offer a free ebook to your listeners. So if you want a ebook of consciousness rising, then you can email me at freeebook@thomascapshew.com. So make sure you got 3 E's in there, freeebook@thomascapshew.com, and I'll send you a download for the book.
Look, I know we didn't like talk too much specifically about the book, but it's definitely it's an enjoyable read. I think it's effective. I think it's practical. I think that it's very it's almost like a spiritual lawyer wrote it. All right. So Tom, I want to say thank you so much for spending some time on Spiritual Dope today. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you for I'm really actually interested in your Spiritual Warrior book. I think that sounds like fun. And thank you for sharing this book with me and sharing it with the world with the work that you're doing.
You're welcome, Brandon, and I'm really grateful for you having me on and all the work you're doing to move consciousness higher.